In today's video, I'm going to share with you the secret to winning IRS audits. Most people think that IRS audits are unbeatable, and here's the secret to coming out on top. Number one, I do this in every single audit that comes in. You need to understand why were you selected? What is the problem on the return that caused the audit to begin with? If we don't understand, we're not going to be able to win. Now, there are some we're not going to be able to do as well. There are some audits that are truly random, and I forget what they're called. They're called something like, basically they're totally random audits and they just want to look at every single little thing. I handle a lot of audits and I haven't seen one of those in a number of years, so I'm not even really sure if those are going on. But typically an audit will have one issue or two issues or a few minor issues, and they just want to understand why was their income not reported or why is this deduction so high. The next thing you need to do, and you can really, if you're watching this video, you're probably already got an IRS notice, audit notice, but it's really important to keep good records. I could defend just about any deduction that was illegal as long as I had the documentation to prove it. And unfortunately, most of my audit clients don't have good records. They say to me, Darren, I have my bank statements, or Darren, I have my credit card statements. Aren't those enough? No, they're not enough. Just to see an expenditure on a bank statement, particularly if you have a commingling problem where you're mixing business and personal expenses in the same bank account. But if just because there's a line item on a bank statement that says you went to Home Depot, there's no way we know what did you buy at Home Depot. We actually need the receipt that says I bought lumber and I bought nails and I bought cement and those things. And those would be appropriate deductions if you're a contractor, for example. And hopefully in that contractor example, we'd even have the name of the job, number 123 Main Street, that kind of thing. The next thing you want to make sure when you get an audit notice is you want to make sure that you respond promptly and professionally. You don't want to ignore your notice. You don't want to miss deadlines. Every single audit notice is going to have a deadline. You can usually get that deadline extended or changed if you just communicate with the auditor, but don't ignore them. That's not a good thing. Typically, if you ignore an audit, it's going to come out much worse. When you're communicating with the auditor, don't volunteer extra information. Give them what they asked for and nothing more. In fact, I typically will not let my taxpayers attend an audit. And the reason is, if they attend the audit with me, they're going to run their mouth, because human beings, we have a tendency to think that we can talk our way out of anything and everything. And so they will try to just explain away everything. And running your mouth is typically not a very good solution when you're in an audit. In fact, when I'm in an audit and representing you as a taxpayer, hypothetically, I will often talk to the auditor and I will run my mouth, but I'm not running it about the audit, I'm not running it about the issues. I'm talking about everything but the issues. And the reason that I do that is because if I can be distracting, maybe they won't see that thing that I'm actually really worried about in the audit. It's worked a lot of times over the years. You would not believe it. When you're dealing with an audit, you need to know what your rights are. You have a right to appeal. You have a right to representation. You have a right to pay only what you legally owe. So a lot of times people think that the IRS can just send you a letter, say you owe us an extra $5,000. That's it. There's no way to fight it. You're just stuck. You're just done. That's not the case. You definitely have rights. You have a right to appeal. The IRS cannot even assess tax against you unless they send you, for the most part, a notice of deficiency. A notice of deficiency comes certified mail, and after you get the notice of deficiency, you have 90 days from the date of the letter to file a suit in tax court. There are some common mistakes. Taxpayers can often lose issues in the audit because they can't substantiate their claims. They can't substantiate their deductions. Why is that? Because they didn't have good records, or because sometimes they just don't want to put up the effort to obtain the records. I would suggest the better way to handle this is to keep good records on a daily basis. I've made another video about this recently, but I use a service called shoeboxed.com, where you basically just keep every receipt, every invoice that you pay, you put it on a pile every month or so. For me, at least, I put it in the big blue magic envelope that they provide, and they scan those receipts for me and store them in the cloud for me forever. That way, if I ever get audited, I just print out my records, send them in with the audit, and there should be no muss, no fuss, because I don't take deductions where I don't have receipts. You can leverage experts, and when you're handling an audit, you can hire an enrolled agent, a CPA, or an attorney to help you with your appeal and frame your facts correctly. Sometimes we can still prevail on deductions where you don't have good documentation. It's a fact by fact basis. When you're thinking about hiring a professional, it's important that you understand what the three types are. An enrolled agent is somebody who has taken a test typically in order to be able to practice before the IRS. But sometimes retired IRS employees also can grandfather in without taking a test at all. And those types actually concern me some because many revenue officers that I've met with or dealt with in the past have no idea how to prepare a tax return, let alone represent somebody on the other side of the table. CPAs are typically very numbers based. There's no advocacy training in their college to become a CPA. And so we do use CPAs on a regular basis here when we have questions about complex mathematical equations and numbers. I would typically suggest that a tax attorney is the best person to help you with an audit. Simple case or simple reason is that tax attorneys are trained extensively in advocacy during our law school. And also, especially if that lawyer's ever had any trial experience, that trial experience is going to come in handy. Why do I say that? Because an audit's not a trial, right? No, but I'll tell you one thing. When I used to do criminal defense, I used to go to court every day, usually in the morning and in the evening. And during trials and even sometimes during plea hearings, stuff would go wrong, stuff that you had no idea that was going to happen and things that you couldn't necessarily contemplate. And then you just had to handle it, and you had to be able to do it with a demeanor that indicated that you weren't surprised, and you just had to come up with something off of your top of your head to try to mitigate that situation. And we get really good at it. And almost every audit, there's things that happen that you couldn't foresee. And that quick thinking that we learn through other types of law can come in real handy when it comes to your audit. So I just wanted you to think about the audit outcome options too, okay? So there's basically three things that can happen. There can be a no change, there can be an agreed adjustment, or you can have an appeal. A no change, simple. They audit your return, they think, wow, this return is the rare perfect return. You don't see it that often, but this is the rare perfect return. There's no changes necessary. The next option would be, we audited your return and you owe $2,000. And if you agree, you sign these papers and you pay us $2,000, or get into an installment agreement and the thing is over. And the last is, no, we just don't agree. If you don't agree, you have a couple different options. Lately, what's been happening is the IRS has just been issuing taxpayers what's called a notice of deficiency. The notice of deficiency gives you the right to file a tax court petition in tax court within 90 days. You file your tax court petition, and then within a few months, you get a hearing with IRS appeals, and 9 times out of 10, it gets worked out like that. There's another thing that they do on occasion. I haven't seen it in a number of years, but they can say, all right, we're going to give you the opportunity to file an audit protest. An audit protest is simply an appeal. It goes to IRS appeals first. If you can work it out on IRS appeals, then they will not issue you a notice of deficiency, and you won't have to file the tax court petition. But again, like I said, typically what we've been seeing the last number of years, probably last decade, has been more notices of deficiency. And I think that's because to file a tax court petition is much more intimidating to your typical taxpayer. So I think it's just another ploy to get people to give up and not want to fight. It's important to have the right mindset when you've been audited. If you've been very aggressive in your tax strategies, your tax deductions over the years, for the past 20, 30 years, and you get audited in a particular year and the IRS wants to ding you for $6,000 or something, and or they haven't found some of the other issues on the tax return, it might make sense to just go ahead and chalk it up to, I've been getting away with things for a long time, and this is just part of the cost of doing business. I'm not necessarily saying you should concede to things that aren't improper, but sometimes you reach a point of diminishing returns where the amount that they're proposing that you pay is less in terms of money and or heartache than if you continue. So these are the things that I really wanted to share with you with regard to winning IRS audit secrets. Hopefully some of these have been helpful for you, and hopefully it's done something to allay the fears if you have been audited and you just don't know what to do. Thanks for watching.